Now it is my pleasure to introduce our second keynote speaker, Dr. Yvonne Skipper is a senior lecturer in psychology at the University of Glasgow and a member of the Melissa Institute Scientific Board. She's the creator of Project Real, an evidence-based program that helps young people detect fake news and misinformation on social media. Today, she will help us understand how to tackle misinformation and equip youth to think critically online.
Hi everybody, welcome. Just give me a second to get my slides set up and then we can get started. Okay, hi everybody. My name is Dr. Yvonne Skipper. I'm delighted to be here in sunny Miami, getting my suntan, and I'm really excited to be part of this conference today in the work of the Melissa Institute. So before I start, I just wanted to do a little introduction about myself. So as I said, I'm based at the University of Glasgow, which you can see on the left-hand side here. It's a beautiful university and it's one of the oldest in the UK. My role involves both teaching and research, so I do a little bit of both of those things, which I really enjoy. And my real passion in my research is working with young people to co-create solutions to real-world problems. So really kind of understanding their perspectives and their ideas and working with them to create solutions. And also I really enjoy when I'm not working, hiking, and you can see on the picture here, there is a picture of a Highland cow, and that's Loch Lomond in the background. So I live about 40 minutes drive from there. So that is a common place. If you ever come visit me, we'll take you up Connacht Hill. You'll see that specific view. That's what we always do with our visitors. So I just like to give a little introduction to me as a person before I get going. Here is some pictures I wanted to share with you of Glasgow itself. I know we've got an international audience today, so lots of people will be joining us who maybe have or haven't been before, but this is our beautiful Riverside district. You can see the Armadillo here, which is an events space, which is very popular as a city. We've got our beautiful necropolis here, where our cathedral's just at the bottom. It's a lovely space to go for a walk. People think it's weird when I tell them to go to a graveyard when they visit the city, but it's very, very beautiful. And this is George Square, which is the main civic centre of the city as well. So very beautiful old historic buildings here. And we've got a lot of culture going on in Glasgow. So all of our museums are free. You can see here on the left-hand side, this is a Kelvin Grove art gallery, which has amazing art installations and lots of beautiful history. And you can also see a statue. This guy is very famous and he always has a cone on his head. I'm not quite sure why. I think it was a historic thing that somebody put a cone on his head. They try and remove it every so often and people will put it back up. So this is literally what he looks like full time now. And last of all, some pictures of the University of Glasgow. So you can see the kind of overview of the university itself. You can see the quad. This is where we hold our graduation. So there's a piper and we process around there after graduation. And you can see on the left-hand side, the beautiful cloisters, which we light up at Christmas time. So it's a beautiful university to work in, and very inspirational to be part of that history. However, before you all book your holidays, I just want a little bit of truth here. Glasgow, the Gaelic translation is the dear green place. The reason we are the dear green place is we have a lot of rain. So it is very possible that when you come to Glasgow, this will be the main thing that you're seeing, but it is a beautiful city, definitely worth a visit if you are able to come at some point. So now we've had a little bit of an introduction to Glasgow. I'd like to start by getting you to think a little bit. We've had some incredibly interesting presentations so far, and I want to kind of get you to think a little bit about what you think about misinformation and safety online and things like that. So feel free to put your answers in the chat if you'd like, or just to reflect to yourself. So my first question, if you were to rank yourself on your personal ability to spot false information online, do you think you're in the top 75% of people, the top 50% of people, the top 25% of people, or the top 5% of people? So you can have a think about that. I'm not going to test you, so I don't know the truth of the matter, but I will say that actually most people rate themselves as in the top 50%. It's very rare for people to rate themselves lower than 50%. It's the same as driving. We all think we're better at it than we actually are. We all think that we are better, more highly skilled than other people. So we tend to think we're above average at it. I'm not testing you, so you might well be in the top 5% of people, but it is interesting to note that we all think we're better than those other people. And that's where some of the problems lie around misinformation, that we all think we're better at it than we are. So we don't need the training. It's those other people over there who need to be trained to get better at it. My second question, what percentage of people can systematically tell true from false information online? Do you think it's 4%, 10%, 50%, or 75%? And the answer is 4%. So you can see, even though we all think we're pretty good at it, it's actually a very, very rare skill. Not many of us are very good at telling true and false information online. My next question, which of the following statements is true? Is it true that true information spreads quicker than false information? Is it true that false and true information spread about the same speed? Or is it the case that false information spreads 2 times quicker than the truth? Or does false information spread 6 times quicker than the truth? Okay. And the answer is 6 times quicker than the truth. So this is part of the problem with misinformation, because misinformation tends to be more interesting. It tends to be more emotional, as we've talked about, more shocking, and people are more likely to click it, and then it's proliferating very, very quickly. So that makes the spread of misinformation a big challenge. It's moving fast, and then anything we're trying to do to stop that spread or to correct the spread doesn't tend to spread as quickly. So that's a big problem with misinformation, that it's spreading very quickly. Roughly how often do people believe false online information? Is it about 10% of the time, 25% of the time, 75% of the time, or 90% of the time? Okay, and the answer is 75% of the time. So we are quite likely to believe false information. So the truth of the matter is, if you've seen one false story, the chances are you probably believed 3 other false stories and not noticed them. This question is about young people now. What is one of the most common reasons young people share misinformation online? Is it because they think it's actually true and they want to help other people? So are they the good guys, or are they the bad guys? Are they wanting to cause harm and spread panic? Or is it because they're trying to get their followers up? Or because they don't understand what misinformation is? So do you think it comes from not knowing, or do you think it comes from trying to cause problems? Actually, the research suggests that it's because they believe it's true. Most of the time when young people spread misinformation, they see it, they think, oh, this is important, people need to know this, and that's why they're sharing it. They're not doing it out of badness. Why might young people be especially vulnerable to impersonation? Is it because they're impulsive and inattentive? Is it because they can't distinguish real from fake news? Is it because they're very trusting of their peers and looking for social validation? Or is it because they don't know what catfishing is? And the answer here is they're very, very trusting. So as was said earlier on, they really trust their peers. They believe them. They trust them. They think their peers know things. They know what's right and wrong. So they trust them. And that can be a reason why they then believe the misinformation. Well, I trust Molly, and Molly has shared this, so therefore I trust the information. Which strategy do you think has been shown to be the most effective in helping young people identify impersonation or fake profiles? Is it literally just telling them stranger danger, just avoid strangers online, kids? Is it teaching them about platform-specific privacy settings, so how to make your profile private? Is it practicing role play and scenarios of deception? Or is it encouraging adult monitoring of accounts, so using parental controls? Okay. And it's practicing, it's getting them to actually do it. So seeing what's happening online and trying out different techniques and things like that. Actually doing it is much better. Putting in the adult monitoring, either through an adult watching them, as we heard earlier, quite often the kids will have a second account anyway. So even if you're watching this one, they've got their top secret one over here. Or they can quite often get around the parental controls. So it's not uncommon actually for parents to set up the parental controls and be like, yep, I've done my thing. And the kids are like zooming around the back and getting rid of them. And then research shows that when children are taught about online safety, the most effective learning happens when the rules are explained clearly by adults, when real life consequences are emphasized, when there are lots of tests and quizzes, or when they co-create the content and scenarios. So which one of these do you think is the case? Okay. And the answer is when they co-create the content. This is when they're involved in creating the content. It's something that's relevant to them. It's taught in a way that's exciting and interesting. So that was my little quiz just to get you thinking. I hope it's got you reflecting a little bit on how good you are at spotting misinformation. So not just looking at our youth, but also thinking about we ourselves and how we can get better at spotting misinformation. And in the next section, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the impact of misinformation. So first of all, like social media, misinformation can be very entertaining. We actually have a whole day well, not a whole day, it's actually till lunchtime, right? You're at the pool if you believe it afterwards. But it's a whole day involved where we think about misinformation, where we create stories actively. And it is the one day, I think, when people are much more critical of the things they see online. They actually do stop and think before they share. So it's a very good day for me as a misinformation researcher. So I go online and I find different bits and pieces. So here is an April Fool's from Scotland, a story where they announced the launch of a new service at Perth Theatre and Concert Hall, the Koala service, because there's been an increase of customers in Perth, Western Australia, accidentally booking tickets for shows in Scotland. And they had a special Koala team trained to ensure the safe return of these customers who accidentally booked for the wrong Perth. Here's another one, you might have seen a few of these, the hidden life of Scotland's wild haggises. So there's lots of stories usually on April Fool's Day about the taming of the wild haggises and things of that description. And then this was a new one this year, I'd never seen this before, it made me smile. This is Nessie getting her annual health checkup from the Highland Aquatic Veterinary Services, and all the tests were given out. She was giving up positive news with no illnesses to report. So you can see it's quite fun, right? It's nice to do these things. It's quite easy now with generative AI to create these sorts of things, and it is a very fun and enjoyable thing to do on April Fool's Day, particularly to go through and look at all these different bits of misinformation. It's a game and we enjoy it. But we know that misinformation can be very damaging, particularly for our young people, because if they're believing these bits of information as true, if you believe that Nessie's health check went well, that's probably not too much of a problem for you. But if you're believing certain other things, then it can have a really negative impact on you. So we know that misinformation can impact our beliefs, so what we think is true, and also our behaviors, so what we do with that information in lots of different fields. And we know that it's not just fake news. You know, young people often see misinformation as just being fake news, which is about world events. But it is general information trying to manipulate people, deceive them, and exploit them. So for young people, this might mean believing false claims that make them feel unsafe, ashamed, or alone, or trusting people who aren't who they say they are. So here's some of the possible damaging impacts of misinformation for young people. And so we wanted to create an intervention around this. So we'd spoken to young people and they said that, you know, misinformation was a challenge for them. There's so much information now. And in a lot of ways, as we've talked about, this can be really beneficial because we've got we've got the news channels, which have always been the arbiter of content, and they select it and they choose the stories that come to us. But now anyone can post up, you know, news and information and their opinions and different things online. So we've got a huge amount of information available to us, which can be great. But some of that might not be as accurate. Some of it might be harmful, as Mitch was saying in his presentation. So we wanted to work with young people to create something to help them to develop these skills, to think about when they see things online, are they true, are they not, why might people be posting them? And we know that a lot of the interventions that exist have been designed for adults. So the bad news game that came up earlier, there's a lot of really exciting and interesting interventions which have been designed for adults. Although a lot of these do still run into the issue that a lot of people think they're better at spotting it than they are, right? So, you know, even just getting adults to engage can be quite a challenge. So that's why it's great that people are trying these sort of gamification approaches. And there are some which exist for young people, but quite a lot of these have been designed by adults. And we know that young people, their way of using the internet is very different to our way of using the internet. Their interests, the problems they're experiencing, you know, their brain development, as we've heard so far, is very different. So we really wanted to work with the young people to create the intervention. And we also wanted to focus on skills. So there are some interventions that focus on misinformation in a specific topic area. For example, health misinformation. And we didn't want to do that. We wanted to keep it really broad, so it was skills-based. And we wanted to co-create the intervention with and for young people. So our first a project that we did working on this was, we called it The Real Deal. And we worked with young people in Glasgow. This was funded by Not Equal, so it's part of the UKRI. And we really wanted to work with our local kids and find out what the issues were in terms of, you know, spotting truth and false information online, how they felt about it, and how they wanted to learn about it. So we worked with 3 schools across Glasgow, and it was great to work with them. Actually, we had about 20 young people aged around about 13. And this intervention was aimed at kind of that 11 to 13 age group, because at this age, we know that young people are, a lot of them are online, although legally you're meant to tick the box, like I'm over 13 years old for a lot of social media, but we know that a lot of them are online. And we thought if we aimed at this group, then it would be a group that would be open to learning, and hopefully we could get those skills embedded early on. And because this was co-created, we also worked with teachers. So they were involved kind of more on the edges of the co-creation. So they were letting us know things like how it fits with the curriculum, you know, what sort of techniques they've used in teaching these sorts of things, how, you know, what resources, time, all those sorts of things were available. We had 4 academics involved, and we were bringing kind of the psychology side of things. So we were saying, you know, these are the ways in which misinformation spreads, these are the sorts of techniques. And so one of the kind of key foundations of Project Real is literally just stopping to think. So one of the problems with the information on social media is as you're scrolling, you've got your kind of cat video, your travel log, whatever it is, and then you've got kind of world events, and it's all kind of mixed together. So it's very, like, we often don't really engage our brains, we're just kind of scrolling. And so we use what's called heuristic processing. So, oh yeah, Molly said that, I trust her, yeah. Oh, that's from a website that I trust, yeah, fine. And sometimes, as we heard before, the kids don't even read it, they just click share because it's more important to do that. So one of the things we're trying to do is get people to really use that sort of systematic approach and stop and think before they share. And then we also wanted to work with influencers. So we've heard about influencers so far, and they, you know, they can be a real force for good on the internet. You know, the kids look up to them. They trust them. These parasocial relationships are not ideal in terms of social development, but they are very good in terms of behavior development. You know, if your influencer acts a certain way, it can encourage you to act that way or think about things in a different way. And we know that young people do not really trust the adults in their life to have expertise on their online life. They don't trust their parents particularly. They don't trust their teachers. They don't trust the academics, but they trust the influencers that they follow, these people that they watch quite often every day, the people that they like. And quite often there's sort of aspirational as well, like, oh, I want to be an influencer, so I need to know about this stuff. So we worked with influencers as well. And we spent 6 weeks really working with these young people in these different groups to understand the issues, to talk to them about how they wanted to learn about it, and then to create the materials. So you can see here, these are some of our influencers. So you can see like how amazing they were. I don't think my hair has ever looked like that. They're very cool. And we worked with them to create these lesson plans. And you can see here the sessions that the kids created. These were the topics that they chose. So we went in very open. We didn't know what it was going to look like, what the format would be, what the topics would be. We literally started from scratch and talked to them about what the problems were, how they wanted to learn. I'll explain this more in the next session. So they wanted to do things about fake news, so spotting real and false information, fake photos, which is obviously photo editing, which is really important when we're talking about the body image issues, for example. Fake people, so knowing who's saying things, you know, being able to check, is this actually, you know, the person who they say they are. Fake stories, which is conspiracies, so being able to spot a conspiracy theory. And fake videos, so being able to spot fake videos, which is quite tricky actually, but at least just making them aware of that. And then the last session brought it all together. It's called Keeping It Real, and this is where they develop their own kind of ideas and materials for other groups. And yeah, I've got some examples here of some of the content which the young people helped us to create. So they designed all the activities. They said, we don't want to write anything. We want it to be interactive. We want a lot of discussion. We want a lot of like spotting and game playing. And you'll notice through all these examples that these were the sorts of things, so the kids picked them, that were relevant to them. So they're not really about world events. It's more the sort of misinformation they might see more commonly on their things. So it's things that you might come across more regularly about photoshopping spots or, you know, holiday snaps and things like that. Quite often they're humorous. So the idea of them working with the kids and the teachers is these skills are being developed in a kind of safe space and in a space where the kids would be seeing these sorts of things more commonly. So these are some of the materials which we can have a wee look at. So this is a story from one of our slides. So you can see Canadian lawmaker caught naked during video conference. We give them the screenshot like this so you can see where it was taken from. So the Huffington Post. So that might give you a clue as to whether this is real or not real. So do you think this is true or false? This one is actually true. This was one of the early COVID days, and someone had gone for a run and accidentally come back and got changed and accidentally left the camera on. So this was back in the early Zoom days when we, well, we're still having technological issues, I guess, but less so now. Here is a second one. So this is from our fake photos session. So this is the Gates of Heaven in Bali. Beautiful picture here. Do you think this is real or not real? And the answer is this one is not real. So you can see here, this is what it looks like. in the real world. So there isn't actually water there. What people do is they stand and they take a photograph with a mirror. So it looks like you're standing in front of a pool, and there is a big queue of people behind that wall and around the corner waiting to take this photo. So, you know, not high tech here, definitely low tech. And then what we do is after these sessions, we talk to the learners. So they maybe do a couple of these as a starting activity, and then we get them to discuss why people might edit photos or how they might spot them. Then we get them to go and look for their own. So it's all very interactive. It's not a kind of big long thing. The teachers will play influencer videos. The influencer will introduce the topic. They'll do some interactive activities, and then they finish. And what was also really important for us and the teachers was that they said, we don't want an encyclopedia. We want this to be something we can pick up and we can use very quickly and easily. So this was another important consideration for us. So at the end of the project, we did some analysis of it, and we found that it increased participants' confidence in recognizing fake news and misinformation, and increased the number of checks they intended to make. So this is the idea that you don't just click share, you kind of stop and go, okay, hang on, who said it? Why did they say it? You know, can I read beyond the headline? So we've got some initial data suggesting that this project was effective, and also that the people who engaged in it did enjoy it. You know, the kids said that it was fun. They really enjoyed the interactive activities. They could see that it was created by young people, so they liked that. You know, it felt real. And we've made some minor edits to it just to kind of based on that feedback. We're going to be doing a little bit more work evaluating this going forward. And so what happened then was we started speaking to Police Scotland. They've been using some of these materials with their school liaison officers. And they got in touch and said, we really like, you know, the initial project reel, but we're really interested in doing something with you where we're thinking a little bit more about kind of legal issues around misinformation. So, you know, a bit more about like online safety, a bit more about, you know, knowing who you're speaking to online. So just really, you know, being able to reflect more on the kind of safety and legal issues around misinformation. So what we decided to do with this group then is we received some funding from the University of Glasgow, and the police also helped us out with in-kind support. And we wanted again to work with young people and the police. So again, the idea here is that we're co-creating with the young people's expertise, with the police's expertise, and with the academics' expertise, because I do not know the answer to a lot of the questions the kids were asking. Is this legal? Is it not? What happens if this happens? I don't know. So we're working with the police and the PSYV group. You can see them here. The PSYV, sorry, I should say, the Police Scotland Youth Volunteering Group. They're a group of young people who are interested in the police. So they volunteer and they come along to sessions to learn about police work, and then they go and help the police when they're out on the beat and events and things like that. So while these kids might not be, you know, they're already interested in the police, they might not necessarily be representative of all kids. We thought, well, if we're going to be working with the police, you know, if we got some kids in off the street to do this, it would probably take us about 6 weeks for them to even trust the police and, you know, to create the materials. So we thought, okay, well, let's work with the group that are already in there. And they were very engaged, and you can see them here. They did a great job. So we had 14 young people involved in this project, and they were a little bit older because of the type of topic we were doing. So we're working with 13 to 16-year-olds here, police officers and academics, and we worked with them over 4 weeks this time. So we went in regularly to their sessions to work with them. And we created 3 sessions here. So the first of these was The Real Me, which is exploring digital footprints and the information about you, which is available online. So I don't know if you've ever done this, but it's worth doing. Just Google yourself and see what comes up, see what other people are seeing when they look for you. There is a huge amount of information available about me online because I do a lot of webinars like this, so you can pick up a lot of video content about me. And it is incredibly easy to pick up information about people, particularly if they haven't set their settings to private on social media. So one of the key questions in this was, how do you keep your information safe? And the activity the kids wanted to do here, again, they wanted videos from the police officers talking about this, but they also wanted interactive activities. So one of these is to look at social media profiles and see how much information you can get from the social media profiles. And then moving beyond that, there is a guessing game. So you can see here, this is one of the social media profiles we created. In the real version, it's interactive, so you can click on all these different panels. And if you look at the information, so for example, here you can see the bus, and underneath he's like, oh, the number 1 bus is always broken, so I always have to walk back from school. You can see here he's taken a photo of his games console, and here a video of some graffiti. And if you put these things together, if you can do a bit of Googling and a little bit of research, and you can work out roughly where he lives from the amount of information that he shared here. We have another profile where we have a girl who's, you know, sharing information incidentally about her school. So you can see the school in the background, and another one where she's on holiday and you can see the hot dog legs, you know, things like that. So things people share without realizing, but of course they can be linked to cyber crimes because people know where you are, they know what you're doing. And it's actually very interesting how much information you can get about people from their social media. And the kids also wanted to create a password guessing game. So you can see here, this is Ria, and this is Ria's social media profile. And again, on the real version, you can click login and you can try and guess her password from the information. So all of these pictures are clickable. You can go on them and click and have a look at the different pictures and the information that she's sharing, and then you can have a wee go at guessing her password. So again, it's not just information about you, it's information that might allow people to access your email, your social media, and things of that description. Incidentally, if you're interested, all of these pictures are generative AI, so they're not real people. So again, showing how good Gen AI is getting in creating very authentic looking images. So, you know, it's very easy now to create a fake profile. So that was the first session. The second session, we were looking at information spreading. So, you know, thinking about spotting true and false information online. Here we were thinking about kind of legal issues around kind of scams, you know, how scams can spread about like cryptocurrency, you know, false information about that, but also issues around where, for example, somebody, a crime is committed and somebody online will say, oh, this person did it. And then people quite often will jump on the bandwagon and this person's life can be made a misery, even if they've not done anything. So thinking about, you know, spotting and thinking about misinformation there. So that was the legal angle there. And what the kids wanted to do here was to, there's a fake news spreader, so you can go on and you can see that kind of, you know, the fake information spreading 6 times quicker, so you can see how quickly it moves through space. And then you can also have a go at creating your own misinformation. And in this, we ask them to create misinformation stories and then use techniques which are commonly used in misinformation. So for example, emotive language. So if something's got very, you know, it makes you feel very strongly, it's using a very strong language, then quite often that makes people, it might suggest that it's misinformation. So they can rate how good somebody does that, and that makes it spread quicker. And another thing people can do is pretend to be somebody else. So, you know, creating a fake account. So the real Taylor Swift, for example. And then that might also lead to it spreading further. So they can create misinformation stories, rate them, and then see how misinformation spreads more quickly in that situation. And then the last session they wanted to do was about, they called it the real connection. And this is thinking about who you're speaking to online. So this isn't the issue that we've talked about earlier around, you know, that connection in terms of connection to real friends, but literally thinking about who you're speaking to online and are they who they say they are, and can you trust them? You know, so is this person actually another child? Is this person, you know, my friend, or is it somebody pretending to be my friend? So there's lots of, again, interactive activities here, but the main one is the kids wanted to do a choose your own adventure story, which was a delight. And for those of you, what we kind of did with this, this is very small text, so please don't worry about it. But basically it pops up as like a game. So there's text in the middle and it gives you a story. So someone comments on your post complimenting your fashion style. You start chatting to them in a friendly way. After a few weeks, they suggest meeting up in person at a shopping center. What do you do? And then you've got options. So you can agree to meet or you can say no. And then there's different kind of outcomes that come from this. But what the kids were really keen on is that this didn't all end in disaster. So we didn't want the kids to all end up, the stories all being like, well, of course you don't meet anyone you've met online. That's just a no-no, you know, because then there's no point playing the game. So there are good outcomes to this. So long as you know, for example, you meet in a public place, you take a parent or an older sibling with you, things like that. And then there's also the opportunity to loop round. So if you make a choice, you can also go back. And it's also been created, which Joe did a beautiful job of, that it's actually percentage based. So every time you play it, it comes out slightly differently because you can't know for sure. There is no kind of definitely this is the real person or definitely this is a problem. So there are kind of like things built into the game as you play it that you'll get different scenarios when you play it. So again, an opportunity for them to think about that in a fun way and to really think about the what might mean. And you can see at the end here, so You know, now you feel uncomfortable, you don't want to leave the shopping centre with them, you make up an excuse and leave, and then lesson learned, maybe meeting alone was a risky decision. So again, the kids helped us to create all these stories. And then what was interesting is when we were working with the kids, and this came out earlier as well, the young people really wanted to create a video for their parents, because they were saying to us, like, my parents don't understand, you know, what I do online. They don't understand what Snapchat is. They don't understand this, that, and the other. And so every time I try and have a conversation with them, I have to spend the first half hour like explaining what Snapchat is. And by the time I've done that, I'm just raging with them and I don't want to talk about it anymore. So they said, could we make a video for our parents about this? And we said, yeah, that'd be a brilliant thing to do. I think it's really important that we get this kind of idea of community and people working together. So what they said was they wanted to go off and reflect on their on this question, what I wish my parents knew about my online life. They went back to school and they talked to their pals, and then they came back to us and we worked with them to create a script. And then we got them to come in and we audio recorded their voices and animated a video, which I'm going to try to show to you now.
I wish that my parents knew that talking to people online is me being social.
I'm communicating positively with my friends online and we're just having fun.
I can relax, explore who I am online, and try out different things.
I am doing my schoolwork and learning about interesting things online.
I'm online a lot. I know what I'm doing and I want you to trust me.
Sometimes I do need your help, but I worry how you will react when I tell you what has happened. I wish you would listen to me, try to understand what happened and my point of view. Be open-minded.
I want you to stay calm and not get mad and not blame me. It's not always my fault.
Instead of being disappointed, help me find a way to do something about it.
I want you to show an interest in what I'm doing online, and I want to share some of what's going on in my online life.
Sometimes it's easier to talk to my friends or big siblings because they've been through it. They're the same age and know more because they're a different generation.
Don't worry if I told someone else first. I wanted to find a more neutral person who doesn't have expectations and who won't be disappointed in me.
If it's something embarrassing, I don't want to tell you because it can be weird. Sometimes I don't know what you'll say.
You can't always just leave it. It's like walking away during a conversation. It can be rude and sometimes it makes it worse if you don't reply.
Things can quickly spiral and escalate online. Someone might say one thing and the next day everybody knows. I feel like I need to act fast to sort it out before it gets worse.
Don't take my phone off of me. Taking my phone off of me doesn't take away from the problem. Instead, I might need your help with how to respond.
I wish you would get informed about what I'm trying to tell you about. It's a different era, and things are just different now.
Don't tell other family members, or make it bigger than it needs to be, like it's the end of your life.
I wish you would not always take things so seriously. Most of the things I see online are innocent, sweet, and funny.
In the end, I'm going to grow up anyways. You can't protect me all my life, so help me learn how to protect myself.
Instead of taking my tech or social media away, I want you to explore and discuss with me what can and can't be done online.
I can teach you things too.
So I hope that video was interesting to you. It's very interesting to me. I mean, one of the very, very big things which came out of the video was the kids, that all of them were like, don't take my tech away. That is literally every single one of them repeatedly said that, you know, because they say, if I tell you something's gone wrong online and you take my tech away, I can't fix it. I can't resolve it. I'm isolated them from my other friends who might be able to help me to cope with it. And of course, then what happens next time something goes wrong is they don't tell you. So that is the kind of the big takeaway. All of them said that was to be really, you know, reflective on what you do. So yes, sometimes things go wrong online, but think about what that might look like and how you might respond to it. And so what we wanted to do was to not just have this video, but the kids also worked with us to create these discussion questions. And so we've got discussion questions for parents to ask their kids and for kids to ask their parents. And the idea is that people can watch these this video together and then ask each other questions. So, you know, how can I support you in staying safe online without feeling like without making you feel like I don't trust you or I'm spying on you? Or how would you want me to respond if you came to me to talk about something online that upset you? So having those conversations early, not waiting until, as we said before, not waiting until later, but actually having those conversations up front, creating a dialogue about what is okay and what isn't. And then also, you know, this idea of I can teach you things too, literally sitting down together and being like, hey, can you show me something that you're looking at online at the moment, and vice versa, you know, parents showing kids what they're looking at, kids showing parents, just to keep that dialogue going, to keep that open conversation. And here's the questions, children for their parents. So children can ask their parents, like, if something went wrong online, what would you want me to do? Do you think online problems can be just as serious as real life ones? Why or why not? This was quite an interesting one for me. And is there anything about me being online that confuses you or you don't understand? Maybe I can help explain it. So again, this idea of not just the kids on their own and the kids in the classrooms, but how we can take that broader and engage with parents and families as well. Then we moved on to a work with Education Scotland, and here we were working with them because it was a bit less about misinformation and a bit more about kind of cyber security, scam prevention, digital well-being. So thinking a bit more broadly about, you know, being safe online. Yes, being safe online is partly about, do I know if this is real or not? Do I know who I'm speaking to? Do I know, you know, what the information is? But what we were interested in this project was more about kind of, do I know how to protect myself online? Do I know about scams? Do I know about settings and things of that description? So again, we co-created. We had two groups of kids helping us with the co-creation. So one group was a group of children in school, and the other group were out of school due to behavioural issues. So we worked with them in a community setting. And we had 2 teachers, 5 youth workers, 2 people from Education Scotland, and 2 academics. And again, we started with this kind of idea of what's worrying you or people your age most online. So we gave them a very kind of broad starting point, and we decided that we were going to work on a comic, so a slightly different approach this time. And we co-created this comic with the kids. So the kids came up with storylines. So they spent the kind of first day thinking about stories, the stories they wanted to tell, thinking about characters, again, speaking to people from Education Scotland who have expertise in cybersecurity and cyber hygiene. And then they designed their story. So you can see here, they actually got them to draw some of their own ideas so we could see what it should look like at the end. And they did the panels and like how they wanted the comic to look. So we talked about telling stories through pictures as well. So how we would do the text and what it would look like. And then we got them to use a bit of Gen AI to give us some ideas about what the characters might look like and what the style might look like. And they helped us to develop the text. So there's a lot of Scots language in it. And it's also set in Glasgow. It's set in Ayr, this comic. So you can see signs out the window, you know, of where it is, and the kids are speaking and using the sort of language which the kids would use. So they spent 3 days doing this. And then we gave their ideas to our illustrator, Georgia, who created the illustrations to go with it. So you can see some of the ideas that came through here. So this was a kind of hacking scam that was going on. So somebody was talking to somebody online and trying to scam their accounts. So the 2 comics are actually ended up being quite different. So the first was a bit more about social elements of online safety. So there's elements in there of cyberbullying, of catfishing. So somebody taking somebody's phone and pretending to be somebody else. How you dispose of your tech. If you're like me, you dispose of your tech by putting it in a drawer somewhere and forgetting about it. But, you know, if you sell it on or if you buy secondhand, what you can do to make sure your account stays safe, and also digital well-being, you know, when to take a step back and how to do that. So the first is much more kind of the social elements. The second is much more about cybersecurity. So things like how to spot a scam, what to do if you see a scam, sending money safely online. So it is, you know, I online shop, right? You know, it is something we do, but how to do that safely, and thinking again about your digital footprint. So what we've done with these comics is they exist already. They've been launched. We had a launch a couple of weeks ago in Ayr. We're just currently doing the lesson plans, which we're co-creating with teachers. And the idea is that these lesson plans won't just sit in IT or computing. So the first one, comic, where we're talking about social elements of online safety, Emma's been helping us to create the lesson plans for that, and they're brilliant. And they're actually about literacy, so story writing. So the idea is that the kids, it's not just that this sits in computing and then I forget about it when I go to all these other places. So they design their characters, they think about stories related to this, they think about storytelling. And the second one is a bit more about kind of the scams, and this is maybe we're talking about using this a bit more in media studies. So again, maybe getting the kids to do some sort of news report or things like that. And the other really important thing with the comics is we did a literature review recently in collaboration with Education Scotland, and it showed that cross-age teaching is really, really important in cyber safety in these sorts of things. So like, again, they don't trust the adults in their lives, as we saw in the video, but they trust other young people. So training up other young people to support each other can be really powerful. So the idea is that these lesson plans actually can be used by young people to teach other young people. So even potentially across the primary into secondary school transition. So secondary school kids going in and delivering some of these things to the primary school children before they come into high school. So they meet some high school students, they may be thinking about these in different ways. So that's a really important part of this project, is that kind of idea of cross-age teaching. So it's the comics and the lesson plans and how older kids can teach younger kids about these issues. And the last project I want to tell you about, because this is literally brand new, is all about using gamification to teach people about misinformation. So we've been working on this with an amazing team of people from across the world through Design for Good. And what the idea is here is that people are creating, so there is, it's a game. There will be both a physical copy where you're holding the cards in your hand, and there will be an online game as well. And so you will be presented with information in the middle, which might be true or false. And your job as an influencer is to look at all these different techniques which people use to spread misinformation. And your job is to guess which techniques that they're using. So again, the idea is that they're thinking about not just is this true or false, like using like the force or intuition, but actually looking at it and trying to learn about these different techniques. So things like fake profiles, manipulative edits, cherry picking of information, things like that. And when you play, your job is to gain followers. So one of the important things in Project Real is we always position our learners as the good guys. So they're not the ones who are like trying to spread misinformation. They're the ones who are trying to stop the spread of misinformation. So here you gain followers by becoming a trusted internet source. So people, when they trust you, you get more followers. That's how you win the game here. And also when you play quicker, you get extra points, because otherwise people can just copy each other, which they do online, right? So the idea is that they're getting points for being trusted on the internet. And that's the same with the original Project Real and the other ones, is that the idea is that the kids themselves are keeping other people safe online. They need to learn this stuff so they can keep their friends safe, because their friends don't know this stuff, and they need to become a trusted internet source to help other people to understand the information. So this is a kind of overview of the main projects that we've been doing. What I'll do in a later session is to talk a little bit about how we authentically co-created the materials, so what we actually did to engage with them. However, all of our materials are available freely on the Project Real website, which you can check out. Not all of them are actually on there right now because we are just testing them, so we don't want to share them with you until we know they work. We're very much about the evidence base. We don't want to share something that's going to make it harder for people to spot misinformation or make them not trust anything at all. But as we edit these, you'll be able to find them on our website, and also on the Melissa Institute website will be a link, and you can also contact me. And I would happily take any questions as well, if we've got 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Dr. Skipper, and for such a for doing this wonderful work, so impactful work, and for your creativity amazes me, and you're now having having met you in person, I know that there's you keep alive the child within, so you obviously connect very well with the youth that you are working with, and they are lucky to have you there, and we're lucky to have you as a partner of the Institute, and now a partner to the rest of the world too. Yeah.
Thank you.
And we now move to our second panel discussion, building social media resilience in youth, strategies for parents and educators. Moderating this session is Dr. Annette Greca, distinguished professor of psychology and pediatrics at the University of Miami, and a member of our scientific board. Joining her will be Dr. Yvonne Skipper, Dr. Sherry Hamby, distinguished research professor at the University of the South, founding editor of APA's Psychology of Violence Journal, and an expert in victimization, trauma, and resilience, and a member as well as of the Melissa Institute Scientific Board. I'll just hang around a little bit here too. Dr. Greca, the floor is yours.
delighted to be here. And Dr. Skipper, I really enjoyed your presentation today. I think it was a great compliment also to the one we heard earlier today by Mitch, taking on now some of the ways we might be able to intervene or help kids address some of the issues that Mitch raised earlier also in his presentation. So I'd like to thank you for a very interesting and illuminating presentation. I think the many facets of the Project Real are incredible, like the real deal, the real me, the real information. I really, I found them totally fascinating and really very useful. I also would encourage, I've looked at a couple of the websites, related websites that Dr. Skipper has linked to in the chat, and I think they're really excellent, and I would really encourage viewers to take a look at them as well. So, with that in mind, I guess the theme of this discussion was to be on strategies for youth and parents. And so actually the first kind of question I have really is, based on your expertise, I mean, what would you really recommend parents do to promote social media resilience in their kids, and especially how they may address issues of misinformation and fake news, given that, as you've also let us know, parents and adults are not especially good at this either. So where should we start? What do you think would be the best way for us to begin to tackle that?
That's a great question. I think, as I said before, it's really important to start talking about it early on, to talk to kids particularly when they're young. We do often sit with them, right? You will sit together and you will scroll and you will look at things. And so having those conversations, even when they're little, like, oh, why do you think she said that? Kids can understand truth and lies. They understand, I would say I don't want the cookie when I really want the cookie, so my brother won't eat the cookie, so they understand these things as they get older. So I think sitting together from a young age and talking about it, and then trying to keep that dialogue going when they become adolescents and suddenly it all shuts down. So being open about our own social media use, sharing, oh, I saw this thing the other day and I thought it was true, and I'm really embarrassed that I messed up and actually it ended up not being true. So talking about those sorts of issues very early on. I mean, the research seems to suggest that these parental controls, they exist, but they're not always terribly helpful because the kids feel like you're then stopping me or you don't trust me, So having an open dialogue with our children is a really important kind of starting point there.
Yeah, I love the video that you shared as well, and I think that could be a good place for discussion between parents and kids. And I was wondering, I think the age issue is a really interesting one. I mean, I noticed that you were targeting in the Real Deal the 11 to 13-year-olds, which would be a great age group to target. But I'm wondering how we can move this even onto either a younger age or especially a little bit older adolescents and even young adults. I mean, I know from teaching college students that they are totally addicted to their cell phone and platforms, and it's somewhat scary seeing how much time they spend on these things. So how can we adjust some of what you were describing to make it either more appropriate for older youth or starting even younger before age 10?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a great point. We've worked with that age group just because we've got the contacts there and we thought, that's the age when they're ready to engage with some of these things. But there are programs that exist for younger people and older people. I think the things that we've created in Project Real are quite universal, because you can see that picture about the thing in Bali, and you can talk about, the questions around like, over tourism and how people might feel if they saw it and they got there, so I think the conversations actually can be different even when you use the same sort of materials. It's just having a conversation about it. But we would like to work with different age groups because I think you're right, there's different challenges, and there's even, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we brought some of the materials over to Miami and with the Melissa Institute. It's been great. But even with similar culturally, in Scotland and Miami, and even some of those, the kids were like, what's that and why is that relevant, and we don't know these influences and things. So it's not always easy to just transplant things from one place to another. So we're really keen to maybe work with the Melissa Institute and move forward and create something new and something a bit more based, with faces, with voices, with local people, with the people that sound and look and feel like you. I think that can be really powerful as well, that, you feel like these influencers or these communities are being represented, and then it feels authentic and is something that I want to engage with, not one of these things that I'm like, oh, this is boring. It's not me. It's not relevant. So understanding the different needs in these different groups as well.
Yeah. That sounds great. One kind of follow-up to that a little bit is, do you think that certain youth are more vulnerable to misinformation, manipulation on social media? You know, for example, are girls more vulnerable than boys? I mean, especially that seems to be an area with eating and I think you mentioned it as well, eating disorders and messages that are targeting girls and their appearance. But you know, are there any particular groups that we should be especially addressing in terms of helping them to promote social media resilience, because they may be especially vulnerable?
Mhm. In our work, we haven't found particular gender differences because we're not looking in that area of, you know, of like the sorts of things we're looking at are not typically gendered, you know, these sorts of things. But I do think that, and we did some focus groups with the kids as well, and they do recognize that we believe misinformation when it supports what we already think. So if we're already vulnerable to something, if we're already worrying about our body, if we're already anxious about our performance or our ability to fit in our community, then if there's misinformation about that, it's going to affect us more. So I think it's more that if you're already vulnerable in some way to a type of misinformation, you're already worrying about it, you're already thinking about it, that might make you more vulnerable. And then of course, as we talked about earlier, the algorithms are designed that once you start looking, or even if you don't start sometimes, but you know, once you do start and then you click and then you're down the rabbit hole and then you're shown more and more of this content, and then it feels more like this is normal, this is what everybody's thinking, and you know, then kids are kind of buying into these communities where this is seen as the way that we talk to women or the way that we, you know, engage or the way we feel about our bodies, then it normalizes that. So I think it's maybe more, you know, thinking about vulnerabilities that those young people might have, and that might make them more susceptible to misinformation in that field.
That's a good point. Let me stop for a minute and ask Dr. Sherry Hamby if you would like to ask some questions or throw out some points for discussion.
Sure, thank you. And I really loved the video that you showed that the teens made, and you know, I think that was really one of the points that I was hoping to draw out in this session, is that we have to be careful about not thinking about navigating difficult or challenging situations, or navigating resilience, if you want to call it that, as just a matter of regulatory strengths. And I honestly think that those teens put that better than I can, even though I will try to speak to it too. But I thought it was so powerful that they talked about how this are a lot of the importance to their social relationships. This is important to part of their, you know, their identity exploration, and their, you know, and that's also part of their schoolwork. And I do think that I think a lot of the work in this area, and I guess what I would want to say to parents is that, you know, we tend to think of this as just this, I don't know, I mean, like for older people like myself, you know, I don't know if we necessarily see this as such a central environment, although probably we should. I mean, you know, I mean, I spend almost all of my day on devices too, and here we all are on devices now, like interacting over screens. And, you know, sometimes I think we also draw artificial boundaries between the kind of screen time and device time that we have and the kind of screen time that we see young people engaging in, where I'm not really sure it's as different as we like to think that it is. But when I think about, you know, thriving or dealing with challenges, my colleagues and I have something we call the resilience portfolio model, and it has those 4 elements that those teens talked about. So it has the social or interpersonal element, you know, the meaning making element, which for young people is mostly about identity development and preparing for the future through their schooling. And then also the environmental element. And I do think it is a part of our environment just as much as the same way as like the buildings we work in or the streets we live on now. And, you know, and then there is this regulatory piece, which is, you know, the way that we manage ourselves or navigate those environments in terms of our behaviors and our emotions and things like that. But I do think that a lot of times, a lot of advice for young people just overly focuses on the regulatory part, like don't do this or make sure you do that, or you need to, you know, limit yourself in, you know, to this many hours a day, or this many sites or something like that. And honestly, out of all of those domains, like the regulatory one is the biggest bummer, right? I mean, nobody really likes regulation. We don't you know, we don't like doing the chores around the house. We don't like paying our taxes. We don't like having to like watch our budget. I mean, you know, like there's all kinds of regulatory challenges that we're all dealing with. And the reason that we manage most of those is because we're motivated for, you know, by our commitments to whatever our sense of purpose is or whatever our relationships are. And I think we need to understand that just giving advice to constantly regulate and control and double check yourself in all of these different ways in a vacuum about why we should be doing that and like what we're going to get out of it is never really going to be a successful strategy. And you know, and I think they just did an amazing job of putting that into some really concise messages for parents. So I especially love to see that.
Yeah, that they did an amazing job. They've been wonderful, and I think that's where the power of co-creation comes in. Is so often they say things, and you're like, yeah, I'd never thought of it in that way. And what you said there made me reflect a little bit on. Recently, we did some focus groups with kids in Glasgow, and we said to them, whose job is it to sort out misinformation online? So these were about 13 years old, and it was interesting because they said the first people is the government because they know the truth. So they should be in charge of stopping misinformation because they know the truth about world events. So they should just stop it. Only the older ones kind of were like, oh, but actually that might be a problem if they were arbitrary in truth, right? But the idea was that they knew. And the second people whose job it was the platforms, because they shouldn't want misinformation proliferating. So again, they kind of knew that people made money on these platforms, but they were thinking of the individual rather than the platform making money. So they, you know, that was interesting to me as well. And then they didn't really think it was their job. It was very much, you know, all these other people. So in some ways that's a good thing because you're trusting, you know, these people around you, you know, to keep you safe. But, you know, it was interesting to me that they didn't feel a lot of personal responsibility. And then moving on from that, I did some work recently we have an organization called Keep Scotland Beautiful, and we do a big spring clean. And we have they do amazing, lots of online events, and people can they do like live lessons. So kids from all over the country can come on and they can pick a part of their community and they can tidy up the litter and things. And together we actually did one on tidying up our online environment as well. So we can keep our online environment tidy too. There's things we can do in terms of the amount of information we share, in terms of, you know, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it relevant? You know, you can pick up trash when you see it outside. You can point out incorrect facts and misinformation when you see them as well, and try and tidy up our online environment. So trying to create communities where we can do that positively and where that's seen as a normal thing rather than it turning into an explosion every time and then people fighting, you know, like how do we, and that's not something I don't think we've nailed as adults either, is how do we have constructive communication when we disagree about some information?
Really critical point. You know, one of the things I was wondering, you know, it seems like we have to really be doing more to prompt children and parents to take on the role of promoting media literacy. And at least in the US at this point, it may be a challenge for the schools to take a lot of that on, given that we're seeing, for example, freezes in funding in education for things that are more in the mental health area. And in fact, just today, the U.S. is freezing or halted $1 billion in mental health aid to schools. So I think a lot of the energy behind this is going to need to come from parents and children wanting to be more informed and better their skills. And I'm wondering to what extent, because artificial intelligence is also, the growing influence of that is also going to be a challenge for spotting fake news and misinformation. I'm wondering if we could, in teaching youth how to use artificial intelligence, whether that could be paired with media literacy skills, because it seems like the two of them are going to need to go hand in hand to some extent in order for individuals and for youth to be able to spot misinformation and false videos and so on. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that or that point as well.
I think it's really important. Yeah. So even when we started this project, it was only a couple of years ago. And when you did Gen AI photos and videos, quite often people had extra fingers. So that was a really obvious way to tell. Whereas now already the ability of Claude and various things to create images has already improved hugely. It's not perfect, but it is pretty good. In fact, the video that you saw at the introduction today was made by Christina, and that was a generative AI video. So they weren't real people, and it looked pretty real. I thought it was real when I first saw it. I didn't realize at all. So Christina did an amazing job of that. Although apparently there is a sneaky, there's a walking baby in the video, which you can see in the group scene, which again I didn't notice. So sometimes there are little tells, but it's incredibly difficult now with all the new technology, and even things we used to say to people, look for spelling mistakes. Bots used to use a lot of emojis. They'd make kind of grammatical and spelling errors. All of this technology is making it harder and harder, and we don't want to get to the stage where people don't trust anything, or they only trust what they think already, right? That's a dangerous place to be in. So I think, yes, it's important to teach kids not just to use ChatGPT or whatever, but to even, it does tell you, it does make mistakes, right? But it says it so confidently that you feel like, well, that must be true, particularly if I believe ChatGPT more on something I don't know about, because I don't know enough to notice when it's wrong. But if it's my own field, I'm like, that's not right, So I think when you're learning, that is when it can be particularly challenging. So I think, yes, lessons about using it need to also include how you might see when it might have been used to create content that might not be true.
Yeah, I have to confess I was a recent victim of that as well, because I got very excited one day before going to my undergraduate class to let them know that Taylor Swift had just gotten married, and it turns out to, of course, be fake news. Okay. But they set me straight right away. Okay.
That's good that you again, modeling, right? You model these things and you go, oh yes, I was got by it too. And then it becomes normal. And then that's what the police were saying as well, is so often when people get got by these scams, they don't want to tell people, they're so embarrassed. And then that means that the scam continues, right? So the more we can talk about these things and be like, oh yeah, I've been got by that and here's how I worked it out, or things, it helps us to create spaces where we're talking about it instead of making it easier for these people. If we're all embarrassed and we don't talk about it, then these things proliferate.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me take a couple of questions from the chat. Let's see what we've got here. Maria Zani has said, working in the international development sector for the United Nations in the field of welfare and well-being, behind the scenes in the creative industry, what can you do to protect them if they are part of disability, equality, inclusion? As I'm extremely concerned at the lack of responsibility of social media in reference to the Netflix 4-part series on incel and how these groups are targeting young boys and using the dark web. So I guess the question there is, kind of what can be done about that? Well, there's a lot of concern about how things are being used or misused on the. Oh, here, regarding cuts in mental health funding, how can schools support children's mental health if the children are in an environment that's potentially abusive, and what resources are available online? That comes from Marie Zani.
So to respond to the second question then, so this is about the schools and mental health. There's lots of resources available online. We can link to those in the chat later. I'll be happy to share them. But it is, again, I think it's once again, it's a community sort of effort. It's the schools working together, the teachers, the young people thinking about, as we have school rules and everything, this is acceptable in our community and this isn't, right? So, and it's working with them to work out what is acceptable in our community. We accept this, we all respect each other, we communicate in this way, we do this, and try where possible to encourage that happening online as well. So we don't have these rules in person and then we go online and we can say what we want, right? So, trying to create spaces where we're able to create communities and talk about these things in a positive way. So I guess I've kind of gone in a circle there, but I was trying to kind of make the point that if we can work as a community to create kind of how we want it to be, we model it as adults, we work with the young people to find out what they want as well. And we try to create spaces where we create these kind of positive spaces for everybody to be able to express themselves.
I mean, Annette, if I might say something that related to this, and which is, and it ties in with a comment made by Sherry before, which is has the co-creation model that you have. I think it's easy to overlook how central it is. because you don't, on the good side, you're giving voice and choice to the youth. And all of us who work with difficult situations and problems that don't have clear solutions know that that is always part of the solution, to really bring in the voice and the choice of those who are really affected. So it's an antidote to the go overboard with regulation piece, because if the question that you were mentioning, Annette, just now, and the concerns that it brings on most of us, about social media and parents, is about, can somebody please regulate this? Can somebody really protect my child before this information gets to him or her? And part of what you are showing is that can still go on, the regulation, but we need to really bring the voice of the kids and what they think is important. I remember hearing you talk about one of the not so good benefits of that. I mean, at least my observation was, I remember when you first talked to us about this project, that cyberbullying wasn't involved. The kids, and you told me, is because the kids did not identify cyberbullying, which was an interesting thing for me to hear and hard to swallow. I think it was cyberbullying is very important to be there. And you said no, they didn't really consider. I wonder if you can say something about that.
Yeah. So in our first iteration of Project Real, again, we went in openly and talked to the kids about, what's happening online, what was good and what was bad. And, we particularly did want to focus on misinformation, but we were open. And that's, like, as Ationi said, the kids didn't identify cyberbullying as a particular problem. Well, not as a particular problem, but it didn't come up in this, and that wasn't what they wanted to focus on. It was more about, how do I spot this? And I'm guessing some of these things might be used in cyberbullying, like editing photos or editing videos or creating content about somebody or writing posts and things, but that wasn't the focus. The focus was more so on spotting it rather than the cyberbullying side of it. So, I mean, yeah, it is interesting that wasn't the first thing that came out. And again, with the young people with the police, cyberbullying didn't come out either. Particularly, it did come out in the comics, so you'll see that is a very big part of the first comic, is somebody's being cyberbullied, and that is a big part of his journey through the story, is how he copes with that cyberbullying.
I'd like to just underscore a couple of those points. I mean, I think regarding what Etione just said, I do think that the co-creation probably is an extremely important part of this project, because that's been found in other kinds of prevention programs too. I think, again, like looking at it through the resilience portfolio lens, that what you're giving them there is a chance to participate in the meaning making of it, and that you're not just asking them to regulate because they're being told to regulate, but they're getting to, and then that helps make it worthwhile to them. So if somebody did want to adapt it, I've seen a couple of questions in the chat and the Q&A about adapting. It is really important that even though those materials you presented are all like gorgeously done materials, and I think they're really terrific, and they could certainly be shown as like models and stuff, that what you would want to do in your program is let them create their own models with their own, like you said, it had all these like Glasgow references and stuff with their own slang and things like that, and characters that are relevant to their communities. And then the other thing I wanted to underscore too about what Yvonne said is just really needing to keep the community focused, and to go back to what you said, Annette, about losing funding and many of these initiatives getting attacked, and and in certain political climates, and and I do think that is true, but I think that we can't give up the mission, or can't give up the community focus, and that it's really, really important not to be like, well, now it's just everyone for themselves, and so now everyone's gonna have to figure this out on their own, but to keep pushing back and keep finding ways to create community in these. If there's not going to be like national or state level or country level efforts, then, to make it hyper local and to work on your school or in your community, so that parents are working together and kids are working together, and that it, that it is really important not to feed into the sort of intentional strategies of dividing and isolating people that are being used in some places now.
Yeah, and to follow up on that, there's an organisation in New Zealand. It's a Maori name. I can't pronounce it. I'll put it in the chat later for you. But it is they do great work, and what they do is particularly focused on information about Maori groups. And so sometimes if there's a new story coming out, they work together to think about how they might talk about it. And so the idea is that, you know, when stories come out and if there's negative views of, you know, or it's being presented in a certain way, they reflect on that, and they try to find kind of shared common ground. So, oh, you know, I see here that you're saying about the kids. Yeah, I'm really worried about the kids too. I've been really thinking about the children's education and how we can take that forward. And, you know, what do you think about this? So the idea is not going straight into, well, you're wrong or I'm wrong or whatever, but trying to find the common thread, because, you know, there is a common thread usually. It's that people are worried about something, or, you know, they're scared, or they feel something. And so the idea with this group is to train people to be online kind of ambassadors, and go into these spaces and have kind of strategies to find a shared experience, to then have a discussion and then move these things forward. So I think things like that, just trying to be more, create communities, because people do things online they wouldn't do in person, right? You know, you would very unlikely say some of the things that you see online in person. It's not common, right? So what they do in these spaces is try to find shared common ground to start the conversation, rather than shut it down, and then try and build on it, rather than going, well, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. And then of course, nobody even reads the discussion, right? They just are like, no, I'm not listening. Whereas if you can find the common thread, hopefully then you can find a space for change.
And I think in all of this too, we have to really, following also up on something Mitch mentioned earlier, where a lot of the organizations that control some of the social media are more responsible outside of the US than they are in the kinds of protections they have within the US. And I think it really is going to be important for adults to put more pressure on the organizations, the platforms that youth are using today, to hold them a little more accountable for what they're putting out there in the public and how it's affecting youth. So I think that's going to be an important thing too. Let me just mention a couple of other questions from the chat, and maybe we can wrap it up then. But Hosan Shabi posed a question: how can we protect children from sexual content in social media, where most photos and videos are not real? And how can we answer their questions about it?
Yeah, that is obviously a very tricky thing. So obviously part of when you're signing up to these things, there are kind of age ratings, right? And people quite often will just tick, yes, I'm this age, and then they move forward. In the UK, we're moving towards, we've got the new Online Safety Act, and the idea is that we're going to, well, through that, the idea is that we will be adding more responsibility onto the platforms to actually do these sorts of checks, and to make sure that they, you know, that young people, or people are who they are, the age they say they are online, to help to protect them from that. But of course, that doesn't necessarily help from content that's being shared on WhatsApp groups, or, you know, like groups where you're not on a platform, you know, it's maybe a private group and being shared there. And again, I think it's, as Mitch was saying, is to have conversations early on about this sort of content, so that the kids are prepared when they see it. It's not the first time they see it when they've got no kind of frame of reference. So you might talk to them about these sorts of things. And again, the police, we've got a new campaign that's being done by Crime Stoppers, the youth version of Crime Stoppers in the UK, on sextortion, and how we can resources to help kids to recognize this, and to, you know, how to act when they're in these situations, because of course it's very upsetting when you're a victim of these sorts of things. And so they've got this new Fearless. Fearless is the name of the group, and they've got this new campaign. I think literally the video is just being done now, so you can take a look at that. But again, it's about kind of, in those situations, you are a victim. You know, you are not the person who's in the crime. But a lot of the kids say that they feel like they're the criminal if they've shared a photo and then they're underage, and then at what point is it a crime? They don't understand where these lines are, and that's something I think Al Penny will be talking about a little bit later on in our panel. About, you know, how kids see these things, like when are you the criminal and when are you the victim. In some of these, it's actually a little bit of a grey area, and that's really important that kids understand that basically the best thing to do is to talk to a trusted adult, because if we know, we can try and put things in place to support.
Yeah, you know, it make me think that a metaphor to what's happening now with social media and it's impacting our lives I like to think about the quality of water that we drink, how little really we do to really collectively to clean the water, to make sure that the water is good for us to consume. And I think this is in the social media arena, it's an issue we adults are dealing with that is similar. We don't play, many of us, in that arena. So and I get bottled water, in a different way. So you don't make it your business. Just like you live comfortably or protected seemingly with the illusion while the water is being polluted more and more. And while the pond of social media is really affecting more and more people. So all this preparation for the conference and the talks today and everything has got me thinking that maybe I had to go back into social media, join it, answer the 10,000 requests that I have from people who had been doing it for years and I haven't replied, and kind of like begin to experience it and see how I can contribute for it to be a safer medium by doing it differently. And anyhow, it's just a thought, because I think we all have, parents can do that, teachers can do that. We all have a role to play in that, as intentionally trying to repair the world. And that is that world in which our kids are really currently living.
So I have another follow-up question from the chat from Hassan, asking whether there is a website or an AI tool that we can use to check the validity of content in social media based on author reviews, responses, so on. I don't know if there's any such source, but that would be great to know about.
There are kind of fact-checking organizations that will sometimes pop up. So, you can go on to Full Fact or factcheck.org, and they quite often will look at, big news stories and do some fact-checking. So you can go onto those and explore what's happening. Another suggestion is, like, when you see a piece of information and you don't know if it's true or not, is to do some kind of reading around it. So find other sources. And some people, even on their social media, will follow people from who have different viewpoints to them, just so they're seeing both sides of the story or both sides of information. So it stops you from being in so much of a filter bubble. You see both sides then, and then you can see, and then you can make a kind of more, because otherwise once you start going one way and then you keep going that way, and then all you see is the information on this side, right? So some people do suggest following people on both sides, or people, news forums who have different perspectives and things, just so that you're seeing the different sides of the debates and the different arguments. But the fact-checking organizations can be useful. And also, as we talked about earlier, thinking about where the money's going and where the money's coming from, like who is profiting from this, can be quite a useful question to ask yourself. Is there money involved in this? And then who might, why might they be putting it in that sort of way?
Follow the money, in other words,
Yeah.
so to speak. Well, one of the things we want to make sure we have the time to briefly talk about before wrapping up is how the Melissa Institute may be adapting Project Real UK version for Project Real USA. We would love to see something like that. Is there any plan to do that, or how can we do that?
Yes, we are running with it, and we had the first pilot implementation of what we are calling Project Real USA, and was done last summer with the collaboration of our partners and Familia in Homestead. So we work primarily with, for those of you who are not familiar with Homestead and the work that is done in the area, that's where a lot of the products are kind of like farming is done in our region. And so there were a lot of children of migrant workers and others in there, and families that are working hard to feed us all. So it could not have been a more different population than the one in which originally was used to create the program. So Cristina Fonseca, who's now behind the camera, making everything works, is also kind of like on the side, become an expert on social media, AI, and certainly on Project Real USA. So she led the groups, and we led a process of adaptation also, and where we included images, information, stories that were local things that they could relate to. And we also included a component that had to do with engaging the parents in conversation about what we had done in the program. Really talking with them about it, and it was one of the most enriching components of the experience for us, because the parents truly wanted to know. They really, nobody had ever raised this issue with them, and so they realized how little they knew in comparison to their kids, and the fact the kids told us that they knew for a fact they knew nothing about it. So it was really they were very correct in their assessment of the limitations that their parents had and their knowledge about that. So we are now also working with different schools in our region, identifying agencies and schools, places of worship, and that may want to really take on the task of working with us as technical support for them to begin to implement tailored versions of Project Real USA. And so that's where we're at the moment. You know, we think the potential is for this to really grow into a national movement here, and to really grow into something that everybody understands that they have a place, and they have the ability to be part of this and help it develop. And this is part how we convince Yvonne to work with us every time we met. Say, listen, we're really excited about this. You got to come and do this with us. But no, I think it's truly amazing. One component of our efforts is also and we had a conversation with Richard learners and others in the psychologists in the US about really using like principles of positive youth development literature and things like that could be used to help kids, youth, intentionally produce safer and more compassion-oriented, supportive digital environments. So that's a component that we hope to continue to work later on. Right now, we're really on the phase of identifying places to work and implementing the program as it is, with some modifications. Does that answer your question?
Sounds great. Sounds wonderful. I look forward to seeing the adaptation. Yeah, I think it is very important, as you pointed out, to kind of make it work on a local level, taking materials that were developed elsewhere and making it pertinent, and getting youth involved and making it pertinent to their experiences. So I think that sounds great.
Annette, one thing that I wanted to add about that, I'm sorry that I missed it, is that's part of, and we'll talk about it at the end of the conference. We do want to create like a repository of resources and information available to folks who are interested in this, to continue to grow together, as well as to be fed in by others who are experimenting and doing things in their communities. So the idea is that we can, again, co-create in a broader way with each other what we're doing, and learn about the things that are being helpful and useful for different communities in the US and across to different parts of the world.
Yeah, and I would like to also point out, before we get into a lunch break, that there are already a lot of resources that were posted on the chat today, this morning. So for those of you who are participating, make sure you check the chat out, because there's a lot of great resources that have been listed there that I'm sure you'd want to follow up on. So in addition to, I'm sure, postings that'll follow this conference day on the Melissa website. So I have to really thank the Melissa Institute for not only hosting this, but for also providing so many resources for people that they can follow up on the programming, the wonderful programming that we've already participated in today.